That Pac-12 expansion you've been waiting for might be closer than you think.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth. That is this right here, college football. Plenty of expansion talk coming today. And Bill Connelly's returning metric, I have a thought on that you need to know. You also need to know this episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Yes, indeed, FanDuel bringing you today's show. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. So, San Diego State's athletic director recently took the stage, and this was kind of funny because it came out after the fact that people behind the scenes were kind of going, hey, why are you saying these things? Why are you going out speaking publicly? We don't have anything really, to announce right now. But he feels confident that they're going to be announcing their media deal by the end of March. That they're going to have their partners. They feel great about the exposure. And that they could add up to 3 teams. Ooh, up to 3. Well, that would be worth its own segment coming up later on today's show. But I want to talk about the television angle and the timing as well. Because the end of March makes me think the Pac-12 is already pretty set on whatever they are doing. That there isn't a wide range of outcomes here. That doesn't mean everything is totally set in stone. But if you're saying by the end of March, in a month's time, they're going to be able to have a media deal, right now, that means you're probably just in the phase where you're ironing out some details. You're not that far apart on numbers and valuations, and you're figuring out what you want the grant of rights to be, which according to reports is going to be a 5-year deal beginning in 2026, which will, of course, position all the schools in that conference to make themselves available for the next round of realignment, which will be in the early 2030s when all the other big media deals expire. And so, or, around that time. They have different years. ACC's 2036, but there's an opt-out in there at some point in time. It all gets kind of mumbled and jumbled. But essentially, they're making the greatest Group of 5 conference that they can to get the best playoff access possible beginning in 2026, which is what I've been calling for them to do for a long time. Lo and behold, here we are. And so the end of March, to me, feels quicker than I was perhaps expecting, but according to people that are more connected to the situation than me, it's not all that surprising. He says, well, yeah, we're going to have it by the end of March. And we feel really good about the exposure. We're going to get more exposure. And we're going to be in this wonderful deja vu. For those of you who have been with me here on the show for a while, thank you for doing that, by the way. We're going to have this wonderful deja vu of awaiting a Pac-12 media deal to get announced. Whew, boy. Those were the days, weren't they? Those days are about to return. Now, I am incredibly curious to see what the valuation is here because financially, there are a number of considerations that the conference is looking at right now. Number one, they're trying to get the exit fees from the Mountain West taken down, which is something I'll touch more on in the second segment on today's show. But their ability to spend at a high level, particularly the non-former original Pac-12 members, that being Oregon State and Washington State, of course, the media rights valuation might make a sizable difference here. Getting $8 million versus making $12 million, that's not a lot of money to the big-time schools. But at the Group of 5 level, that could be significant. But Oregon State and Washington State, of course, before they were ditched by 10 other schools who they had a long history with, said, hey, on your way out the door, can you give us a bunch of money? And lo and behold, they can. And so according to reports, Oregon State and Washington State has got some financial peril up there in Pullman. They've got a new president in place, and hopefully things can get stabilized and they can get on a more sound financial footing. But still, those two schools have the ability financially to be the top spenders in the conference. That doesn't guarantee them success on the football field, of course, but it does guarantee them the better opportunity to get there. But of course, Texas A&M famously has not been to an SEC championship game. They spend as much money as anybody in the league and have for a very long time. So it doesn't guarantee you anything like that. But Ohio State's roster didn't exactly cost $0. Nobody else's high-level roster. Texas spent a lot of money. Oregon spends a lot of money. Turns out that does indeed help. It just doesn't guarantee you anything other than an opportunity to build the best roster and have the best team in the conference there. So I'm curious to see what their media rights valuation is, but also who their media rights partners actually end up being. Because what I've discussed in the past is that, the Mountain West contract ends after, I believe it's this upcoming season. And that's a deal that is with Fox and CBS, because their games are on CBS Sports Network, and every now and then a game on regular old CBS, but then they have games on Fox and they have games on FS1. So if that contract is no longer there, and you have schools mostly from that league, well, it would make a lot of sense that you would open up to those partners. But are you going to open the door to anybody else? Are you going to have a big streamer in there? Is ESPN going to get involved? I don't know. That stuff, at least from my knowledge and inside standpoint, inside-ish, that was kind of facetious. But that hasn't been made totally clear. But what is clear, based on his comments to a crowd in San Diego the other day, whether he was supposed to be saying it or not, is they're going to know about a month from now. Heck, maybe it'll be less than that. Maybe it'll be 3 weeks from now. We'll look up and go, oh, look, they've got a deal announced. I am really curious. I'm incredibly curious by the continued messaging from San Diego State's athletic director here and everything that we've seen in the past. It appears to be media rights first, expansion second, meaning nobody that they add. If you have a theory in your head, and I'm going to discuss some theories about who they could add in the second segment on today's show. If you think, well, they should add Texas State or North Texas or Memphis because, well, you bring in all these television, well, you bring in all of that. If they are going to get their media rights and have the grant of rights signed first by the current 7 full-time members, plus Gonzaga for basketball, then they are going to go and get a team second. That means no one moves the needle, no matter who it is. So if they had an ace in the hole, and that's curious to me. I don't know how, if you were now maybe it means that, a school like Memphis is completely off the table, but if you were adding a school like that, does that really not change the calculation at all? Is the bulk of the media rights valuation of the new look Pac-12 really baked into the existing members that we've got here? It kind of seems that way. So there are a number of different options that the Pac-12 can go down here. And again, San Diego State's AD, J.D. Wicker, said, yeah, we could add 1, 2, or 3. Well, how would that look? First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. When the game tips off, the NBA action, it's just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your bets into a same-game parlay. You can do that with your live bets, too. I mean, that could be some real juice for you there. And if you want to bet college football, yeah, you can do that, too. You've already got win totals available. You have got individual games that can be bet. You have got conference title odds, national championship odds, Heisman odds. It's all over there. Go check it out at FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So the most interesting part to me of J.D. Wicker's comments from the other day were when he said, we're going to get our media rights deal. Then we're going to add 1, 2, or 3 teams. Like, whoa. 3? 3. How are you doing 3? Who are these 3? Now, I have thrown water on the flames. I've been a wet blanket of sorts the one time that I talked about Texas State here on the show. If you're a Bobcats fan listening to or watching this and you're going, hey, are we going to get into the Pac-12? Could this happen? If they go 3, I don't know how Texas State would get left out. That seems unlikely, but not impossible. Now, if I were the Pac-12, the #1 school I'd want, if you were just talking about who strengthens my conference the most in all of its athletics? And let's disregard anything else. Nobody brings any different media rights valuation. It's all the same. Travel is going to be something we just don't consider anymore. Best of the West. We've thrown that idea to the wind. Memphis is number one. Memphis, to me, would be the unquestioned number one. Now, they barked up that tree and, fell off the branch a bit when they, offered schools like Memphis and Tulane. And then, they came together with that statement to say, hey, we've been offered by other conferences, or one other conference really, but we're staying with the American. This is where we're going to be. Well, I don't know what would have changed for Memphis between now and then, except if the Pac-12 goes to their media rights partners, whoever they may be, and it gives them sufficient exposure, or at least comparable exposure to what Memphis has in the American, but it's for significantly more money, then, hey, that could be something that's changed that makes the Tigers look at the calculus and go, well, yeah, this is probably something that we should consider now. But what you also have to factor in to however big that gap could be, if they're going to get $4 million more to be in the Pac-12 versus the American, well, that's great. But there's also a buyout that has to be paid to the American Conference. It can be paid over time, but still has to be paid. And secondly, the increased travel for all of the sports, that's several $million more. Depending on which team it is, the general estimates have been, $2 to $3 million extra. So would it really be worth it to them leaving the American, go to the Pac-12 for, an extra $1 million, $2 million on hand, depending on what it would be? I think from a media rights standpoint, the Pac-12 should be looking at, 10 to 12 million. If they get in that range, I think they're doing pretty darn well. And if you're a Pac-12 fan, you can have faith in Teresa Gold and what she is, bringing to the table as a commissioner compared to what George Kliavkoff had before. But because that obviously did not go supremely well. But Memphis would be the top option to me. But if they were to add 3 schools, right, they're sitting right now at 7. That would get them to 10. 9 would kind of make more sense, because then you could have an 8-game conference schedule. Everyone plays everyone every year. It's not the end of the world to rotate it, but to just have one team that you miss every year, not the craziest thing. There are far crazier things. I mean, look at what happens in these super conferences. In the Big Ten and the SEC, you've got this revolving door of, hey, we haven't played Missouri in 3 years. All of a sudden they're coming to town. They're in the same conference, so you get that big scheduling disparity. You won't have that in a conference where you have smaller numbers. And I don't think if you get, up to 10 schools that's going to change that calculus in a significant way. So I guess it could work. I just wonder how the calculation goes for the university presidents to say, well, if we bring in 3 schools, we're diluting our own media rights payouts here by having an extra mouth to feed. If no one brings value, you have to bring in 1, right? That's an absolute requirement. You've got to bring in 1 for 2026. You don't have to bring in a second, but you could. You don't have to bring in a third, but you could. So then you factor in, well, what's the calculation between this school strengthens our league athletically and this school is just a draw on what financial resources we are getting from our media rights partners. But if the number were to be 3 schools, the other thing that comes into play here is the Mountain West exit fees. So the Pac-12 and the Mountain West are still battling out in court over the exit fees from the Mountain West, which are like $17 million per school. And I don't believe that has to be paid in a lump sum. Don't quote me on that, but that's not typically how I believe those payments have worked. When a school leaves a conference, it can be paid, kind of structurally over time. But still, that money has to go from one conference to the other, but the Pac-12 is trying to get rid of that. If they are able to win that lawsuit and the exit fees are just done away with completely, what you might be looking at is a pitch to UNLV, where I suspect the Pac-12 wants to hold all their conference championships anyway, so having UNLV there would make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And, their recent football success, I think, would elevate the brand football-wise of the conference from a national perception. So UNLV would certainly make the most sense. And heck, UNLV might be the top target because of their geography anyway, because of the teams that are out west. That's the one you'd probably want to look at. Air Force has got really strong credentials football-wise as well. I don't think they have the same ceiling as a program like UNLV, but their floor is incredibly high. You know, we saw UNLV's floor. It was bottom dweller. But their ceiling? I mean, they were close. They were in the Mountain West Championship game 2 years in a row. And I think they are absolutely capable of being a team that makes a conference championship, you know, every couple of years in the new look Pac-12. So UNLV is I think the school that the Pac-12 wants the most. But if they're going to go to 3, I mean, if the Mountain West exit fees drop and those schools suddenly become, you know, far more affordable than they would be with the exit fees, maybe they just try to, you know, go full-fledged Mountain West, blow it up, and have some schools get hung out to dry like Oregon State and Washington State were. And on the one hand, it's hypocritical. On the other hand, it's survival of the fittest. You adapt or die, and this is the landscape, not the one that the Beavs and Cougs and everybody else chose. It's just the one that they were handed by the powers that be in this sport. So if you were to do that, then you'd probably go Nevada, Air Force, UNLV. I would think. I don't think San Jose State would make the cut. They don't have an incredibly strong track record really anywhere in athletics consistently. And Nevada would just kind of be a partner with UNLV. You've got Colorado State, so they'd get paired with Air Force. So from a travel partner standpoint, I mean. So that would be where they'd go. But let's say let's say the exit fees remain and Mountain West schools are super expensive and they only want to take one. I suspect that would be UNLV. I think they would try to go out and get Memphis. But if Memphis says no, you're probably left with Texas State and North Texas if you're going for 3. And, you know, I haven't talked about North Texas a ton here on the show, but who else are you going to add? Logical travel partner, getting as big of a stronghold or a foothold rather in the state of Texas that you possibly can. Like what other option would there be? You guys let me know in the comments below if I'm just wildly overlooking somebody here. But yeah, if they were to get 3 schools and only one could come from the Mountain West and, you know, Memphis isn't on the table to reconsider, then yeah, you could see a North Texas, Texas State pairing because leaving the Sun Belt is pretty affordable. It's not a hard thing to do. North Texas is not in the Sun Belt. North Texas is in the American Conference, of course. But leaving that conference is not as hard as leaving the Mountain West. So I'm fascinated. I'm fascinated by what that calculation is. If they land on 2, who are the 2? But if they're going 3, how's that going to play itself out? All these pieces. It's just everything's just kind of circling the wagon right now. The vultures are out. They're waiting. They're waiting and waiting and wait. They haven't had the opportunity to prance on it all just yet. But it's really, really close. The end is near for their prey. And so the vultures of realignment, they are circling overhead. They're winding up. They're winding up. The threat is not imminent, but just know it's on its way. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below where the Pac-12 goes and such. So, Bill Connelly's returning production metric. I think it's a great metric to look at. Useful information. Or is it? First reminder of this episode brought to you by Prize Picks. March basketball is here. It's right around the corner. There's no better way to get in on the action than with Prize Picks, the best place for daily fantasy sports. With Prize Picks, you pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, and if you're right, you can win up to 1,000 times your cash. It's fast, easy, keeps every game exciting. So you go in there and say, hey, I think Jason Tatum's going off tonight. You take him over. I think Jaylen Brown's going under tonight. You take him under. Those hit, boom, you get fast payouts. And when you win, the money hits your account in as little as 15 minutes, no waiting around. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. So a great item for someone like myself who talks about college football all year round is ESPN's Bill Connelly goes and looks at the returning production of every single team in the country. 136 FBS teams. They're all on there. They are all on there. So let me read you the top 10 because your perception of the top 10 is going to feel one way when I read them to you for 2025. And then I'm going to read you 2024 and everything's going to turn to mush for just a moment. Number 1, Clemson, 81%, only school in the country returning over 80% of their production from last year. By the way, they're the reigning ACC champs. They're the current ACC favorites, and they should be. That's a big reason why. Number 2, Arizona State, also co-favorites in the Big 12, along with Kansas State. Illinois, could be a sneaky playoff team this year. Texas Tech, Kennesaw State, all right, Texas A&M, Rutgers, Vanderbilt, Boise State, Oklahoma. Okay, so that's the top 10. Now you hear that list, and I can make a case for several of those teams to have, based on the program, what you consider a successful season going into next year. Vanderbilt just made a bowl game. That's a successful season in Nashville. But they're not going to win a national championship, of course, or an SEC championship. That's the expectation at Oklahoma, though, is to compete for one or be closer to competing for one. They're right there at number 10. Texas A&M. Well, they got to be able to take that step forward. So here's the interesting thing. That's the top 10 for next year. A lot of optimism in there. That's my overall takeaway from that lineup of 10 schools. You've got a lot of optimism. Boise State, favorites in the Mountain West. Oklahoma, optimistic about a bounce back with a new quarterback. Rutgers, solid. Vandy, solid. Texas A&M, year one, strong foundation. All positive. Here's the top 10 from a year ago. One moment. Got to soothe the throat with a little bit of water here. From 2024, the returning production going into last year, and I will declare each team as either underachieved, overachieved, or neutral. Virginia Tech, massive underachievement. Iowa State, slight overachievement, but kind of what we expected. I'd predict him to go 9-3. They made the Big 12 championship game. Nebraska, underachieved. Oklahoma State, underachieved. Virginia, no opinion there. Northwestern, underachieved, but not a huge opinion there. Kennesaw State, all right, I'm not up to date on my Kennesaw State Owls football there. Rutgers, no opinion there. Miami of Ohio, again, no opinion there. They had a good season. Okay. Syracuse, overachieved. Was that a lot of, well, it was all about the returning production? Where was the Ohio State? Where was the top? Not even in the top 10. Heck, Ohio State wasn't even in the top 20 of returning production last year. Cal was. Utah was. They imploded. Wisconsin was. They underachieved. Missed a bowl game for the first time in over 20 years. I'm not telling you this to ignore returning production. I am telling you this to say that metric is not solely indicative of anything with regards to on-field success. You know, Oklahoma State, I felt was overrated after their 2023 season. I thought, I know they made the Big 12 championship game, but they weren't actually that good of a football team. So them returning a bunch of production, I'm fading them. And I didn't fade them hard enough in 2024. But they again return a bunch. What does that mean? Well, it means that the coaches have an opportunity to use that experience to succeed. But it comes down to the coaches. It comes down to the coaching staff. Because if you have that much experience on the roster that has already proven at some level to be able to produce or shown potential, or else those guys wouldn't have been playing the year before. If you screw that up, you have really screwed up. Mike Gundy screwed up this year. Big time. Brent Pry at Virginia Tech. Some people Maybe the host of the show, maybe not. I don't recall. Some people predicted Virginia Tech to go 10-2 with the schedule they had and how much returning production they had. I don't know that I'm going to get fooled by the Hokies again. We're going to find out. Record predictions will start on this show in July, which can't get here soon enough because that means the season will be right around the corner, of course. But I'd just be cautious looking at that roster. Like someone like Illinois, for instance, very favorable schedule. Their quarterback is returning. That's huge. They've got a high level of returning production. That's great. Does it automatically mean that they're ready to be right there? Because again, that was a lot of teams last year returning a bunch of players, and all these programs kind of have something in common. That they're not ones that consistently make that jump. Virginia Tech, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, there's always leaves you wanting more. And a lot of them left you wanting more last year. So that's the giddy optimism you get to end today's show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.